Before we start today's episode, I want to give a few words to one of our sponsors, which is Stutterbox Productions. If you're looking for a solid team of people to get you started with your next gig or event, this is the company to contact. They're actually bringing back Field Trip in September 16th and 17th, and they have plenty more shows lined up. If you guys have not been to Field Trip, that is a blast, legendary, one of the top shows to go to in Iowa. So what are you waiting for? Head over to Stutterbox Productions' Facebook page for all of your needs today. Guerrilla Graphics Design Agency. If you want to plan your next video or project, Guerrilla Graphics Design Agency can provide you with a clean and fresh looking product. Having personally collaborated with this company several times myself, I can say from experience they know their shit, and working with them has been worth every penny. Head over to GuerrillaGraphics.com for all of your design needs today. That's GuerrillaGraphics.com. Hello, this is the McAllister Hours podcast. You're watching, so let's listen to it. I'm your host, Cole McAllister. Today, we're joined by Marco Battaglia, right?
Battaglia.
God damn it. You libertarians always fuck up your last names. I'm just kidding. How you doing, man?
Doing well. Well, pretty exhausted, but...
Yeah, you've been having a long week. I think it's... You were saying you're a correctional officer. I think that's kind of an interesting blend for the Libertarian Party.
It is, really. At the women's prison in Mitchellville.
Oh,
and I never thought I would be a candidate for political office. Never thought I would be a correctional officer, but here we are.
Yeah.
For me, basically, I was running for Attorney General of Iowa in the last cycle.
Okay.
And I was working in. For about a decade, I worked in financial crimes, so helping people that had their identity stolen, their money stolen in some capacity, elder abuse, fraud, things like that. Helping people to either get their money back, their property back, or at least helping them to educate them so they don't get in that situation again, hopefully. And then I got basically given an ultimatum of you drop out of your campaign, your race, or you're fired. And I had one son and a baby on the way, so it was a pretty, at the time, intense period because, it was a historical race. The first time there was a two-way race in Iowa between a Libertarian and a Democrat, in this case, Tom Miller, I think the longest serving Attorney General in the country's history. And, we were well positioned to campaign through Election Day, and I just couldn't justify backing out. So it was a tough and interesting time, and I knew that they badly needed people in corrections, and I just thought, hey, I didn't win my race. I did historically well.
Yeah,
got more votes than any non-Democrat, non-Republican in Iowa history.
Wow. And
I think more than any other Italian-American in Iowa history. And it's like, when you're not a Democrat or a Republican, you do kind of have to toot your own horn a little bit because no one else wants to do that. Like, they don't just say, oh, wow, you did this. They're like, no, we don't talk about that, right. Because you're not one of the two big gangs. So it was a very difficult time in the moment, but I didn't know what to expect. But I thought this was a way I could help outside of politics, and also see what it was like, how people were being treated, help people understand their inherent rights, help people get out of there and not come back. And, also, if I needed to say something, report something, I felt entirely comfortable doing that. So it's really been surprisingly positive experience. I didn't know what I was going to walk into.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really admirable. Sticking to your convictions and like, in the face of like, adversary on your position, like you still went forward.
And if anything, it's just emboldened my views on a lot of issues from what I've seen and what I've learned over the last 3 years, going on 4 now.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what got you started into libertarianism? What got you into all this?
For me, I grew up here. I literally Woodlawn Elementary, Meredith Middle School, Hoover High School. And then I went to the University of Northern Iowa. I never really encountered anything outside of Democrat and Republican until the first time I really kind of got like shaken and I guess my Matrix moment or whatever was when Jesse Ventura was running for governor of Minnesota. And just seeing that, hey, there's this person that isn't from either of the two parties that, everybody gets taught about. And he's got less money than the incumbent and then the other people he's running against. He's making money from small donations from selling T-shirts, and I am agreeing with a lot of what he's saying. That really, that victory was the first time I kind of, he called himself a libertarian, and this was kind of before, before a lot of people, I think, knew what that word was, because it's always been, I guess it's weird. I don't want to, it's so hard to, it feels intentional, right? That you don't hear about the third, fourth, fifth, 10 of the largest parties in the country's history. You don't hear about very much, even though Libertarian Party has been a party since 1971, and it's the third largest party. It's consistently had candidates of all different kinds, jump through all kinds of different hoops. Every time they set the bar higher, we tend to meet it. So it's an interesting phenomenon when you really dig into the history. But yeah, it was that Jesse Ventura campaign and him calling himself a libertarian in his book. I think his first book, or certainly one of the first few, was what first got me feeling like that was an okay fit for me.
Okay, so how long ago was that, would you say?
That was the end of the 90s.
Oh, okay. Oh, so you've been in this minute.
Yeah. And then something really weird happened at the national level, as tends to happen.
Yeah.
I was getting involved and kind of watching from afar at the time, and Bob Barr was the presidential candidate that got nominated, and I was still kind of new to the liberty movement, the broader liberty movement as a whole, outside of just one party or anything. And that was strange to me because just coming from a Republican Party, coming from 3-letter agencies, it was like I didn't quite understand. So it kind of pushed me away for a little bit. But then, just every cycle, I think I got more and more comfortable with that label. Like if I really kind of have a problem with the political party system in general, but if I'm going to put one next to my name, that's the one I'm comfortable with. I can speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I see what you're saying. There is kind of something that you're acknowledging that, like, I mean, I guess I don't know where you are in the spectrum, but like if you're like a anarchist libertarian per se, like there's something you're kind of admitting to, like, I am against government, but I'm still putting a political party. But that political party does seem to have an end goal of like wanting that true liberty,
And it's kind of, it's that, and that's, the space that I come from. And it's also
like the anarchist type of,
and and it's also, so I would say this idea that the things that, some of the people that are actually in office, the best they can do is say, reference like the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. And I come from that place where that is actually limiting to an individual's rights. Every single person that we encounter, I feel like has inherent rights. And when you start trying to say what you do have and what you don't have, then you start running into trouble right away. So, now we can hope that someone in office might, stand for one part of the Bill of Rights, one sentence from the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. And to me, I want someone that goes well beyond all of that at every level of office, whether it's local. I really feel like the country could be the freest place on the planet. And if not the country, then the state could be. And if not Iowa, then Polk County could be.
Yeah,
Des Moines could be. Your neighborhood could be. To me, that's your biggest sphere of influence is, wherever you lay your head.
Yeah, localization. Yeah, that's always been.
Yeah, local control of local issues is something that's part of Rick Stewart's platform. And I'm really glad for that because I understand the importance of that. I've run for city council. I was in the last at-large election and was against Carl Voss, and I came in 3rd out of 7 people in that. And that was really eye-opening because it just showed me that how dysfunctional Des Moines City Council is. To me, I've traveled around the state now during the last decade, and it's by far the worst run city council in the state. Most problematic in pretty much every single way.
So, like, in what way specifically is it the worst?
Basically just these tyrants running a meeting, very limited public participation. Now you actually have to get patted down and go through a scanner and a body scanner. I saw little kids getting patted down. Like the last time I went, it's bizarre. Like, I don't know. The sad thing is they had finally gotten someone new on the city council, Indira Shoemaker, and it all kind of happened after that. So that was, they're so afraid of having someone in there that's not their crony, that a lot of stuff has gone down since then.
Yeah, I have like, I don't know how you feel about her, but I cannot stand Kim Reynolds. And I feel like she kind of represents like a lot of that same like corruption. And
the most interesting part is I've been around quite a few in the legislature, quite a few in state office, and Kim Reynolds and Adam Gregg, the weird thing to me is either they don't know who I am or they claim not to, and I'm not sure which. Like, Rick and I have introduced ourselves to them, but they're like 2 of the only people that just do not interact. Like, send them a communication, just sort of like a friendly, hey, when are we going to get debates or forums going? And I think that's, to be honest, a tactic. Like Kim Reynolds accepted the nomination from the GOP a couple weekends ago. And, she mentioned candidate Desir by name. And she knows her running mate now is Van Lacker, candidate Van Lacker, I believe, Lanker, I think is how you pronounce it. And, she mentioned them by name, but she didn't mention us. And I think that's intentional because she knows that we're a bigger threat because, you can only claim to be for reducing the tax burden. You can only claim to be for reducing the size and scope of government if you don't have someone else that's actually articulating how we're going to do that. Yeah. You can only rely on that if you have someone that's like opposite side of the spectrum to you on all issues that you can just kind of make your pro wrestling heel. And that's kind of like how it works, right? They just swings back and forth, and they just like to blame the other side and say, you know, they just bank on that. Like we're the freedom party, we're the liberty party, you know, your dad voted for us, your grandma voted for us, and it's just you're going to keep doing that no matter who we prop up here next. So that's the weird part, right? Is like, I think if the Adam, Gregg, and Kim Reynolds could get away with it, they would show up to no debates and no forums. And I think the people of Iowa might let them off the hook that way, sadly.
Yeah, and well, that just goes to like the, you know, the party, you know, like being dedicated to your party. Like it seems like people in Iowa like don't even think about it. It's just like it's the R. That's all they care about.
You just show up. I think I check all the boxes off for your guests here. I'm a bass player, and a podcaster, and a politician, and I was in some movies, but I never got any speaking lines yet. But I did once write a script. It was like a zombie film, and it was on election day, and the opening scene is the zombies just still line up and vote for a Democrat and Republican, even after becoming zombies. And it really does feel like that, except the one aberration to that, in my experience, is when I ran against Tom Miller. There were people that, you know, Republicans, like old school Republicans, that didn't come out to vote. They probably actually voted, like held their nose and voted for Tom Miller because they were scared of what liberty, you know, really looks like.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of a testament too to, you know, the rise in technology. You know, I think a lot of younger people like me are, you know, getting into libertarianism. You know, the Mises Caucus, like that just turned up. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So, as being active in the party for over a decade now, and Rick Stewart for longer than that, I've just seen the whole caucus thing as a mess. It created a lot of infighting, friend versus friend, who's libertarian, who's not. So I've never joined a caucus, and it wasn't really that caucus specifically. It was a problem I saw long before that was a thing. So I do my best to not really hitch up to some faction. Like, for example, I'm the first convention I ever went to, had becoming friends with people like Adam Kokesh, Vermin Supreme, John McAfee, however you say that, and actually I have a letter from him hung up in my office. His body is still.
They still haven't found his body.
Well, it's still being held.
Oh, held. Okay.
Held in a morgue, and I think they claim it's because there's issues. You know, they still want, the family wants another autopsy, but that's bizarre. But, you know, it's a fitting end to the John, his whole saga, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's not over yet.
What? Just to describe, I kind of know what happened with him, but like, what happened with him? Exactly?
So at the end of, I don't know what he was actually being held on at the end of the line, but the prison claims he committed suicide, and the family, his wife, is not sure of that.
Not convinced.
Wanted that to be, you know, reviewed, I think. And I don't 100% know the details, because it's been he's been passed away some time ago now, so I can't remember all the specifics to it. But
okay. Yeah, I remember kind of hearing about that a couple years ago too. That was quite a stir. It's crazy how, you know, how much of it is the government. You know, you never really know.
But yeah, these were this kind of, you know, people that came from different factions in the party, and I've still managed to maintain friendships with them. And I have friends from all over the political spectrum, and people that don't want anything to do with the political spectrum, and I can appreciate, you know, both sides, all of those sides. So to me, it's silly to keep putting ourselves into groups and keep fighting with those other groups. I'm sure there are some positive things that come out of it, but for me, it's nothing I felt like contributing to so far.
I see. So you claim yourself to be do you just consider yourself an anarchist, or what's your, do you have any specifications on?
Yeah, I wear it on my sleeve. So my Mount Rushmore, my statue garden would be like Frederick Douglass, Victoria Woodhull, Voltairine de Cleyre, Lysander Spooner, Frederick Bastiat, Filippo Mazzei. I don't know if you know any of those individuals.
Frederick Douglass sounds familiar. Yeah.
But so also, I just feel like the word is misunderstood. And
no, I agree 100%.
It basically means that me and you were sitting here. You don't rule over me. I don't rule over you. And now we have a disagreement. So how are we going to resolve that peacefully? Mm-hmm. We're not going to, we don't have any way to get around it other than talk to each other and work it out. Because, anytime you do get state force involved, you're now saying who is going to be able to point a gun at who eventually, and someone's going to intervene on either your or my behalf based on a few people's interpretation of a law. And so to me, it's about peace and about voluntary exchanges, about competition. Mm-hmm. Like Frederick Bastiat said, basically the opposite of oppression is competition. And to me, that's simple yet profound.
I see. So let me ask, this might be kind of a, devil's advocate, kind of like playing a certain situation, but because I agree with a lot of what anarchism says. I consider myself kind of an anarchist because I do think that there are maybe some things that I can imagine a government intervention might be. Like for instance, like if because anarchism, like capital anarchism, plays down with the market, and there's a lot of benefits to having things by the market, like private security, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the government does undercut a lot of those markets, but you have a situation of someone acting maliciously. They have a weapon in there. Mm-hmm. Because that is a minority, but that is something that's still affecting populations at large. There are certain things I think that. I think Rick said it best last time he was on there, like not necessarily reducing government, but most importantly, reducing the harm of government.
Oh, yeah. Reducing harm, reducing fraud, reducing waste.
Yep.
Not so much arguing about who should and shouldn't pay taxes, but where is the money going? What's the paper trail like? And I don't have a conflict, doing what I do and with my philosophy and running for office with my philosophy. To me, if I was just, living on my property, doing my best not to get involved in any of that, it's still happening. So yeah, to me,
that's fair.
To me, it's about trying to, like, once I had, my sons especially, trying to show people that, there's basically another way to solve problems rather than advocating for a new law all the time. And also rather than making people into criminals. Mm-hmm. And, people complain all the time about money in politics and career politicians. And, it's just one way to give people another option. And then once you sign up to do that job for that term, you do the best job you can to do the job you signed up for. To me, it shouldn't matter what one's philosophy is, where one falls on the political spectrum. Like if you win on election day, you signed up for that, and now here we go. And for me, when that's the position of governor and lieutenant governor, a new administration, two of the most important things you're going to do are the people you're going to appoint, and then the budget you eventually get to create. So you actually will have that first chance in how long to actually cut spending, actually reduce the size and scope of government, to actually appoint people based on merit and experience and who is most qualified, as opposed to okay, we're from this party and we're going to get a bunch of people that think like us to stack the deck of a board of appointments or of the Supreme Court. It's like, I don't think a lot of people realize what happens when you have like all these people like Branstad, Grassley, Tom Miller, like longest serving politicians in the country. Dictionary, look up career politician. These are the people. I don't think people realize this is like a handful of people that have made so many appointments and gotten so many of their cronies in sensitive positions of power. So to me, it would be groundbreaking just to get anyone that's liberty, freedom-minded in there making appointments. Like, you've already done something grand to move the needle, move the liberty movement on down the road. So those are, just right out the gates, you've already done some of the most important things you're going to be able to do in 4 years.
I see. Let me ask you this. So yesterday, the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. As an anarchist and as a political figure, what are your thoughts?
So ever since stepping out and running for office, I've taken it very seriously, and also serving the people of Iowa, I've taken very seriously. So I'm always listening, always learning. Where I initially come from is that, I've been part of the births of my sons. They were very difficult pregnancies. I know in any pregnancy, any number of things can go haywire, go wrong, and become an absolute medical emergency. Mm-hmm. And this is at any point in the process. And it's hard for me to ever think that anyone else, the state, should have some involvement in those decisions that happen. So that's where I just started from. Mm-hmm. But then I go to, I've talked at some of the most liberal crowds that exist in the state of Iowa. I've talked to some of the most conservative crowds that exist in the state of Iowa. One time in Sioux City, I got grilled for like an hour and a half on, do you believe in the Bible as truth? Do you believe in the heartbeat bill? Is abortion murder? And it was, I had to say no, and then have a conversation with people that thought differently than me. And I listened to them and I learned from them. So rather than just coming out and saying, it's a lot more complicated than just being like, yeah, we're pro-choice, we're pro-life.
I agree. I hate the binary personally.
Yeah, it's so much more complicated than that. But to me, the most important thing is that if people feel passionately about that issue, like I imagine most people really do, based off this decision, you're going to have to, either be prepared to take matters into your own hands or be prepared to go and get involved with the state, with your state legislature, because that's going to be one of the most important things the legislature does in the next session, is make it clear what this means in Iowa. And I think I do have a unique perspective. I work with incarcerated women in Iowa, and say they do make the act of having an abortion a crime. They make it criminal. This is where people will go. And just the thought of, I don't think a lot of people think through their positions and what that actually entails in the real world.
I agree.
It's not so much that anyone wants, people to necessarily end their pregnancies. It's not so much that anyone wants murder, it's like, but what do you do to someone that has made that decision? Is it really in anyone's best interest to put them in a cell, taxpayer money with inflation? Who knows how much it is now, but pre-inflation numbers, it was something like $40,000 a year to house someone in incarceration in Iowa.
Wow.
So, like, what do you actually want to come of this person? That maybe they had a serious, a medical problem, or their body just chose to reject this baby.
Sure.
Do you want someone that had that traumatic experience to be investigated as a criminal? And then what? They're in the court system, and it just, to me, seems really flawed, and that I don't think very many people actually want that.
Yeah.
Like, they just think, I'm pro-life and it feels good and I'm sticking with that. But I think if they actually are forced to think about it at the state level, there'll be some good conversations, I hope, in the legislature. And I really hope people can get into the details of what that means to punish someone for murder because they induced a miscarriage or chose to have an abortion. I think also this whole timeline process is flawed, right? Because people from both camps seem to really want to be like, okay, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 24, whatever. A medical emergency can happen anywhere along the process. So to me, what being a libertarian means is you err on the side of freedom, err on the side of liberty. That doesn't mean that you can't, live by your own moral code. That doesn't mean you can't do everything in your power as an individual to work towards fewer abortions if that's your goal. It just simply means let's be realistic about what we're doing when we call this murder.
Yeah. Not imposing your will on others.
Yeah. I mean, like, for example, when we have different degrees of murder, and most people, I think, would agree when you are defending yourself, that's not something that we want to see you punished for.
Unless you're in California.
Yeah. That's a whole interesting place. But yeah, so to me, if your own body starts becoming your foil and you fight to survive, I mean, I could never imagine me being with one of my partners and saying, no, you're a murderer now, and I can't support you, and I need to make this decision for you. So to me, I hope we get to have real conversation, and I want to see people take like intellectually sound positions regardless of what they think. Like, I don't think people have gone out there and actually talked to Iowans all over the spectrum as much as Rick and I have, probably, that are running for any level of office, and heard them out and tried to have these difficult conversations with them. Because I think, especially right now, it's important when people on, all over the spectrum have been driven to feel, all kinds of emotions, and some act on those violently. And to me, that's like a really important role people like Rick and I can play in the political process is, stand for peace, stand for voluntary exchanges. Let's talk about the issues without putting someone in a corner as our enemy. we have some common enemies that I think we should be looking at instead of fighting amongst our neighbors.
I agree. Let me ask you another one. So we've had some recent school shooting violence, and there's been a lot of different perspectives and thoughts on that. I think the libertarian mindset, and that's pretty clear. But I guess for those who are curious, what do you think, like, you and Rick would proponent for school safety or whatever?
I think there is something to local control over those issues. There'll be, certain parts of Iowa that are more comfortable with saying, I trust my teacher, my children's teacher with my children, and I trust that they'll responsibly handle a firearm. Mm-hmm. And if that is their decision and it's, everyone's comfortable with that, I think that should be best decided at the local level. And then you have, most likely a school in one of the bigger cities where there's a lot of people that are uncomfortable with that. And I think rather than having this top-down decision from the governor's office, it would be best decided, among local control.
I agree.
And I personally, we actually have a teacher that's part of our campaign team. He was one of my favorite teachers growing up, and it's an honor to have him on our team. And I would 100% be comfortable with him carrying around my boys. I would actually feel better personally. And I know not everyone shares that view, so I wouldn't want to force it on people that are uncomfortable with that. But, I think there are, especially smaller communities, where they can get a consensus on things like that, and they should be able to have that local control to decide something of that sort. I also think you got to look at your citizenry, who you're representing in your communities, and see that we haven't had this kind of violence here. We've had one incident that I think falls in the category of a mass shooting event. And it was on, I think, the ISU campus quite a few years ago, 30 some years ago, I think.
Okay.
And it was an individual with a handgun. So I think you got to go with what your citizenry and your community is providing you, instead of necessarily reacting to events that happen in other parts of the world and other states. So I think, I feel really, when I was a kid, I felt really safe in our schools, and I feel safe sending my children to them. So I almost think it's almost theater, right? Because Reynolds has used that as an excuse to spend a lot of money and to exert a lot of control over
I think $100 million.
The school process. And same goes with the, the school choice issue. So where she runs into trouble as the leader is these rural areas where there's not a lot of choice, right? And she has her own party pushing back, like, hey, where are we going to send these kids? And to me, that's another issue where it'd be better to be controlled locally than having the governor say, top down, this is what we're doing. I mean, pretty much across the board, right? Like she could have championed anything. Her administration could have championed almost anything in the last cycle. They chose ethanol, propping up ethanol, and they chose, getting it so one trans girl in Iowa couldn't play on the bowling team or something, and turn that into protecting women's sports.
Of all the sports, too,
just
bowling
kind of rang into that, protecting Western civilization sort of diatribe. That was a big, I don't know, just a big show, if you ask me, but with real consequences, right, for people that identify as as that community. And again, that should be, I think, unless you actually have an issue of a civil rights violation, that should be a matter of local control as well, I think, because you probably do have some schools that, they've never met a trans person before, so they have their own thoughts on that, and it might make them feel good to say that if we ever have one, they got to play on this sports team. But it's a lot of arguing over things that I don't think people understand, the real world consequences. And I think it makes certain people feel good. So yes, we want a new law that protects us from this new thing. So yeah, it's another tough issue, but to me, that's what it means. I'm going to stand for maximum liberties for all Iowans all the time. I don't care what kind of person they are. They have inherent rights. And then you kind of start getting these people that come at you and say, well, you're trying to get special rights for these people. And I counter that with who's introducing this legislation that uses this language. Like, it's all come from the GOP. Like, they're introducing legislation on these issues, I think, because the more, I guess the less genuine among them know it's a way to stir up donations and votes and get people excited in a important election cycle. And then probably there's some people that really feel genuinely like they are protecting women's sports. There's an interesting thing that happened recently. I think it's Brittany Griner. She was a basketball player, WNBA, I think, and she was detained in Russia. And this, to me, highlights some things about women's sports. If you really want to take it to the professional world of sports, like, I think everybody would know about this, right, if it was LeBron James or something. But she's, that level of athlete, what LeBron James is to the NBA, she is to female sports.
Oh. Okay.
And, maybe a lot of people probably haven't heard about that. And it's clear to me that Russia is using her as a pawn in broader geopolitics, but because she was actually detained over having a vape cartridge.
Jesus Christ.
But so
like marijuana or just regular?
I think it was just what, tobacco,
just
nicotine.
Damn.
Yeah.
What the fuck? That's crazy.
Yeah. So to me, you also don't have males that have to feel the need to go over to play somewhere like Russia to survive and make money. Like, I couldn't picture someone, like LeBron James doing that in the off season.
Yeah, it's going back to like the Kim Reynolds and kind of, it's actually interesting. You bring up the ethanol thing. I actually wrote a final paper on that in my last English class. Yeah, she's
That's great.
Yeah,
I've been saying let's listen to economists the whole time for years now, and it was really unpopular when I first started talking about it. Like, people from both the larger parties are still really gung-ho about backing ethanol, supporting ethanol, mandating ethanol, spending taxpayer money to prop up ethanol, building these pipelines to kick that ethanol can on down the road. So we've really highlighted that basic property rights, not allowing eminent domain to be abused for these private companies to basically, make it so certain people make more money off ethanol for so many more years. To me, it's as simple as stop distorting the markets. Stop distorting the agricultural markets, and you will see. Have you ever heard of this podcast? It's called We All Want Clean Water.
No.
So it's definitely check it out. I recommend it. They get into the issues really in depth, and like how we can move towards actually cleaning up our waterways and moving in a better direction. Stop contributing to the dead zone at the end of the line in the ocean. And a lot of it comes down to things that the libertarians agree with. Stop distorting the markets. Stop contributing. You're basically, this is a liberty issue because you get your tax money taken to subsidize these harmful practices of, monoculture, and then you get your tax money taken to clean up after the mess, which is unsuccessful so far. And then you also pay out, if you get public water from Des Moines Waterworks, you're paying for the nitrate removal process to make that water, allegedly up to the minute scientifically safe to consume. And so you're like triple taxed in this situation. And a lot of people, I think, don't understand that. And to me, freeing the farm market, like I talk to people that want to farm all over the state, and they will be I'm confident they'll be some of the best stewards of the land that the planet has ever seen. And the best way to allow them to do that and stop distorting the price of farmland is to stop the mandates, stop the subsidies, what any economist would tell you for, 50, 100, hundreds of years. It's just really outrageous how much government meddles in the agricultural market. And then also tells people, hey, you can't grow hemp if it has so much THC content. You can't grow cannabis. Only that's the biggest, I think one of the biggest hypocrisies with the GOP in Iowa right now is they're perfectly fine with one company owned by one man growing cannabis. And some of them even profit from that situation.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you do it, if you go and get a pinch of herb, you can still get, booked and arrested. It still happens. Like I've had friends in the last few months that have gotten arrested for having, a little bit of flour, a little bit of herb in their pocket.
Yeah, I remember when they announced what was in Des Moines. They were like, yeah, we're not going, maybe, I don't know if this happened in Des Moines, but they were like, we're going to put marijuana in a lower, like, yeah, right. They can still, I was explaining to someone the other day, like, it was like, why don't they legalize it? It's because they make so much more money on the prison system. Like,
that's
arresting people.
A lot of people, I think, maybe don't understand. It feels like they do, but they still vote for the warriors, right? The champion that system. And I think a lot of people don't understand, that these are human beings that we're incarcerating, and you're putting someone that got busted with marijuana in there with people that have done, sex crimes, rape.
Yeah, sure.
That have killed someone.
Done things malicious things.
Yeah.
Not putting something in their body.
Or, they've actually, hurt someone in different ways by stealing from them, damaging their property because maybe to feed an addiction. Mm-hmm. But to me, that's what rehabilitation is for, people like that.
I agree.
And now you're just housing someone that was a nonviolent drug offender to the tune of that $40,000 plus a year. Basically, what is the rehabilitation for that person? Drugs are bad. Don't do them. But hey, I was using this as medicine and it was really helping me. Doesn't matter. Don't do it or you're coming back. You drop dirty, you're coming back. It's just such a bizarre thing that we're still having to talk about this, but here we are. I got involved coming out from behind the scenes because of, have you ever heard of Benton McKenzie, the McKenzie trial?
It sounds kind of familiar, but
this
not
was
really.
when Reynolds was lieutenant governor and Branstad was governor. This man, Benton McKenzie, got arrested for, using growing cannabis to use as medicine. And at that point, he couldn't even say in his trial, like, that this was medicine for me and this was helping me reduce my tumor activity. And, he said, this is a death sentence. You are sentencing me to death. And then he passed away. And then they went after his family for helping him. and so I'm certain that Reynolds remembers me from blowing her phone up and her email up when that was going on. So just to claim that one day, if we ever are on the same debate stage, I'm going to be like, can you just confirm that you do know who I am at this point?
She just take a shot and next.
But yeah, yeah. And it seems like anywhere we go, right? We've been to, probably in the last few weeks between Rick and I, maybe 30 counties, I want to say. And I don't think I've been to one smaller town where we haven't been asked about, like, these people just want to compete. They want to be able to sell cannabis. They want to be able to use cannabis. They want to be able to grow hemp without having to worry about destroying their crop, or without having to worry about being taxed into oblivion and creating a gray market, making it so they can't compete with something like MedFarm or now Bud and Mary's, which is so ridiculous, right? This company that basically has a state-given monopoly, enforced monopoly, changing their name to try to fit in more with a dispensary in a state where you can't compete and open up your own dispensary. It's pretty bizarre. And, every person that's holding back legalization and decriminalization is, I think, now complicit and guilty in this whole mess, because they know there's just this, we somehow in Iowa let our elected officials just get a pass, like they're somehow ignorant, like they can't, go use a search engine and figure this stuff out. Like, if you or I can do this and do some research, in 15 minutes, but somehow they can't, they're incapable of looking into an issue and seeing the reality. We let people get away with way too much.
Do you think it's just like kind of like a groupthink mentality type of thing? Like, do you think it's like religious? Like, what do you have any thoughts on why people still think like this?
Well, the religious thing is so bizarre to me, because religious liberty, I think, is very important, and any libertarian I know will defend, whether, even if that person is an atheist, they'll defend someone else's religious liberty. Mm-hmm. And this is where we run into trouble, with pretty much any issue. But let's go with abortion. Is it not religious liberty if your faith believes that life is that first breath the baby takes after they come out? Is it not religious liberty if your religion doesn't consider an abortion to be murder? Like, when you're actually standing for religious liberty and you're genuine and not just pandering, you're standing for the whole spectrum of religious thought and belief, right? Not just the one that makes you feel good, that you think this one specific figure has it all figured out and they're the word of your God. It's like, that's not religious liberty, and it's never been religious liberty. It's religious liberty is about letting people practice their religion in peace and not persecuting them. They can, I think there are people that would still, have a witch trial and burn someone at the stake if they didn't, if they were practicing, pagan, Wiccan witchcraft. It's like, you do not understand religious liberty at all. It's just a pandering thing to some people, or they're just that confused.
Yeah, but it is kind of an interesting correlation, though. Talking about religion, there is almost kind of like in terms of like overreach. Like, there is a religious overreach. We have seen times in history where religions have gone out and praising the word of God and like committing violence against people. Like, I think that's kind of like are you religious or?
I was raised Roman Catholic. Same. And then I have a lot of friends that are atheists, and I just find it hard to put myself in a faction, even in the realm of religion, right? I guess I would say I'm a firm believer in letting people have the freedom to find their path.
Yeah, no, I agree. But there is kind of like, there is an interesting correlation, don't you think, between like the overreach of both government and religion. I feel like there are a lot of libertarians who are like strongly religious, but they almost like, I feel like for some of them, they almost don't see the hypocrisy in like, you know, you're giving like, okay, like church police, for instance.
Don't see the hypocrisy of using government to enforce your specific religious values.
Yeah. And then saying like, you know, my religious, you know, belief can be an extent where I do the same thing essentially.
Yeah, it's
an interesting irony.
That's a challenge. And I think that's something else where people just don't get challenged enough. They don't have friendly conversations with people. It turns into rage or hate or bigotry or religious persecution, and then you're off the rails and you have no longer contributed. You've wasted everyone's time at that point. You haven't had any common ground to be had. So a couple weeks ago, I was in Washington, Iowa, and it was they had a Juneteenth celebration, which I've put out. I had an editorial published about just how Juneteenth, I think, is my favorite holiday. It's like the one holiday that celebrates liberty in the truest sense of the word. And in Washington, I learned about the city called Buxton, Iowa. Have you ever heard of that? So it basically it's a ghost town now. Okay. It doesn't exist, but Buxton, Iowa. This was where basically the closest thing you've seen to a market that's not captured. Basically, the coal industry created this town. So it was run by a corporation, and they they started bringing in people that were black and immigrants from other countries to work in the coal mines. But then, the people that lived in this city needed the services that everybody else needs. So you had, black doctors delivering babies for white women. You had black pharmacists. You had black people that were enforcing the laws. And in every walk of life, all the goods and services that you were being given. And initially, they paid their workers in gold and silver. So this is like the most libertarian existence that I've ever heard of in the country. And so it's like this was during, other places still had Jim Crow. They still had active Klan. A couple miles away, you would have Klan rallies. But they didn't mess with Buxton, Iowa, because the population was more black than white. And, they had a baseball team. This was before you could go and play elsewhere if you were black and play baseball. Like, it was a mixed baseball team. And, they had a black YMCA and just all this. It's just a really fascinating study. You should look into it. Buxton, Iowa.
Okay,
and so it's like, to me, this is a shining example of what local control and avoiding a captured market can do. You actually had these people that they chose equality and they chose equity, and they lived peacefully. I don't think they had any issues of racial violence during the existence of the town that anyone could recall. But then, the demand for coal went down, and it just kind of became a ghost town. It was like this glimmering, shining moment of hope in history, where people got along and worked together and got paid, the same as the different types of people with different, skin colors and different backgrounds. And it's just a really fascinating study, I think, a cool piece of history that was here in Iowa.
That's awesome.
So that's one thing I love about campaigning around parts of Iowa I haven't been to and meeting people, is basically like the things I learned that I didn't even know. Iowa is home to quite a bit of fascinating libertarian history. Like, I don't know if you know, it was Laura Ingalls Wilder and Rose Wilder Lane. the author.
Yep.
Her and her daughter. The mother lived in Iowa for like a year, and there's a museum that's awesome. And they're huge in the broader liberty movement and the American libertarian movement history. That was Burr Oak, Iowa, which I think is a ghost town as well now.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I watched a lot of that growing up, so I never realized the correlation, though.
Yeah. Both the mom and I think the daughter, to a greater extent, was just boldly libertarian. And John Hospers, he was a teacher and an author, and he was the first Libertarian Party presidential candidate. He got an electoral vote. He's from Pella, Iowa.
Okay.
And his running mate was Tony Nathan, and she was the first Jewish person and the first woman to get an electoral vote in the country's history. John Hospers, a great teacher and author. He's got some great books that I recommend checking out. He was from Pella, Iowa. More recently, Richard Campagna was a vice presidential candidate. He was living in Iowa at the time. We're actually endorsed by Art Olivier. He was Harry Brown's running mate. He was also the mayor in Bellflower, California, which I think this is something interesting, right? That I think should be just as newsworthy as a Trump endorsement for Kim Reynolds. We're endorsed by Jesse Ventura, former governor of Minnesota. We're endorsed by Laura Epke, who was libertarian senator from Nebraska, who got occupational licensing reform legislation almost, I think there was one vote against it, almost unanimous tripartisan agreement. And, these are issues that get lost having these extreme social GOP people in power. Is like, why are we not getting occupational licensing reform? Why are we not ending certificates of need? Why don't we have a timeline for when we're going to end the income tax in Iowa? Like, these issues get lost in the football of social control and culture and left versus right. Like, these are things that I feel like Rick and I can accomplish with the legislature. Like, I've made, acquaintances, friends with some people in the legislature from across, both sides of the aisle. We could accomplish in 4 years, I firmly believe, occupational licensing reform, ending certificates of need, freeing the hemp and cannabis markets, freeing the agricultural market, protecting Iowans from eminent domain abuse, move us in the right direction on water quality. What else? We could get more freedom for gambling. And I have friends that before they outlawed it, they made their living playing online poker. It's ridiculous that Iowa hasn't moved the ball on that online poker. Like, you can make money, and it's, it's bizarre. The fact that Reynolds is telling Cedar Rapids they can't build a casino. I think the legislature cited gambling fatigue, which I don't even know. Like, what? The real reason, it seems to me, is that they, don't want competition. There must be involved with the current casino market.
Or alcohol or something like that,
Alcohol is still a big racket too. Like, do you know anybody that's tried to make or distribute their own beer or alcohol? I do, and it's not easy to start any business in Iowa. Mm-hmm. So something's very wrong, right? If we have these GOP people claiming that they're pro whatever business, pro competition, and we have Iowans begging for competition, begging for the freedom to start their own business, to start a new occupation without jumping through all these hoops. Like, it's just absurd to me. You have these people propping up Med Farm and propping up ethanol, You have these people telling you you can't use your own property to have solar panels if you could be growing corn and soy on your property. Like, I get the problems that some people have with wind and solar. It's the subsidies that you're angry at. You're not angry at someone using wind and solar to harness as much energy and power as they want on their own property in the way they see fit. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with who Thomas Massey is.
No.
He's in the Republican Party, but he basically lives off the grid thanks to solar power, and he got a Tesla battery from a Tesla that was totaled, and has his own setup, and he gets into it really well. How you shouldn't think that solar or wind is your enemy. You should just be upset at the subsidies, like you should be upset at the ethanol subsidy and the ethanol mandates and the market distortions, and even the oil industry at the market distortions related to all these things. Where you get your energy from. Is that basically a monopoly? And what say do you have in would competition bring your prices down? Yes, all the time. The answer is yes. But yeah. So, I mean, that's what we're trying to do, right? Is highlight that there's some things we firmly believe we can accomplish that Iowans are telling us these are their big issues, and they fall right in our wheelhouse. So let us have a shot to get these things accomplished. We also have some great candidates that are running at more local office, and how the Iowa legislature, Toya Johnson, Jenny Cadell, and are two that come to mind that I've become really good friends with. Two of like the sharpest, smartest, hardest working people I know. Iowa would be like, you would be thrilled to have these people in there fighting for you. Not looking to make a career out of politics, not looking to make money out of politics, actually standing for liberty in the true sense.
Hell yeah. Well, I think that's what it's all about, man. We're over an hour, but you have your notes and all that. I wanted to give you a chance if there's anything else you wanted to discuss or mention, or
I guess I would just end on rickstewart.com. Just put in the search engine, Web345, whatever you got, Marco Battaglia, Rick Stewart, Iowa. You'll find, I think we've been more transparent about our positions. We've answered more questions than I think anyone else running for office in the last decade. Look up anything about us. Look up my debate from public television with Jake Porter. Like, we talk the same no matter who we're talking to. If you're a Democrat, we're talking to you about the issues the same way as we're talking to a Republican. If you're in rural Iowa, you have farmland, we're talking to you the same as if you're in the city. And the thing that I see with inflation, gas prices, things of that nature, is what I hate to see is you see inflation go up, prices go up, and volunteerism goes down, charity goes down. People are not as happy because, doing charity makes people happy, and they have to work more, take on another job, work more hours. You see less tipping when there's inflation. And like, we're forced into this less voluntary, less libertarian way of living when inflation is out of control. And so I think we really do have a much better answer to that. And we should, have a gas tax holiday. And we should have done that by now. And I don't think really anyone is in office that I know of right now is prepared to do what it takes to lower gas prices, because that means stop distorting the markets. That means work on peace with Russia, Iran, Brazil, Venezuela, China. That means fostering peace between Russia and China, and, ending subsidies on all these people, Venezuela, Iran. Like, it's like one party gets in power, we get a better relationship with one country, but a worse one with another. And no, we need to work on diplomacy with all of them if we really want a competitive market that will bring prices down. And I don't think there's not a lot of people that will currently stand for that. So we need more people in office that will. And we need more people in office that won't persecute people for, having marijuana, like a county attorney. We need more people that won't persecute a woman for, ending a pregnancy, because, that is going to be important. There's a reason I've run for city council, as well as state level office, because you need people that are going to err on the side of liberty and stand for civil liberties, inherent liberty at every level of office.
Fuck yeah. Hey man, I love what you have to say here. I love you and Rick. You guys are fucking awesome. You got my vote for sure. Hell yeah, this has been a great episode, man.
Yeah, thanks for having some real conversation. We'd be, it's a long way till election day. We got a tight schedule, and we'd be happy to come back sometime. And something big happens, it'd be nice to have a place to talk freely about it. So,
hell yeah. Well, and I think things like the podcast, this is like the true core of libertarianism. Like independent, like having you guys on talking and all that. So, Marco, it's been a fucking pleasure. Great to have you.
Yeah, McAllister Hours, awesome.
Hours.
I'm now in the books with some of my friends.
You're in the bracket. Yep. That's awesome, man. That's awesome that like you know people and stuff. That always kind of
well, I think pretty soon it's going to be just people with podcasts interviewing other people with podcasts, and that'll be all the content on the internet. Oh yeah, this is my podcast, and here's my podcast, and
people aren't gonna have names anymore. They're just gonna have podcast names.
Yeah. Mine's more music related, but we have had some politicians on. We had Liz Bennett, who's in the Iowa House, who's a total metalhead. I would have never guessed. It was awesome.
That's cool, man.
We rock out now.
That's awesome. All right, well, we're gonna sign off here. Stay tuned. Hey, one more thing, go check out the Patreon, McAllister Hours, or Patreon/McAllister Hours. You can find extra content there. Give us money, libertarianism, capitalism, all that shit. But yeah, otherwise we're here Wednesday and Saturday, every Wednesday, Saturday at 7. So, Marco, again, it's been a pleasure. All right, everybody. Peace. Have a good one.